Today I've got the FiFine Amplitank SC1. This is a new budget audio interface. It's got 2 channels, 1 mic preamp, and an instrument input. Let's take a look at what comes in the box. Some instructions, foam padding, and the interface itself, along with a USB-C cable to power it with a C to A adapter on there for lots of computers that won't have a built-in USB-C port. Here's the interface itself. It's a nice looking little box. It's all plastic, so I would worry about potential electrical interference, and we can test a little bit of that. Aside from being all plastic, the build feels nice. All the pots have a nice little resistance to them. They feel smooth. You've got phantom power on the front, as well as a mic or instrument switch for the combo jack, and then you have a second instrument input. So you could sing and record electric guitar or a stereo, 1/4-inch inputs from a keyboard, for example. So pretty nice to have that in a budget interface. That's kind of a necessity for me. There's also a direct monitor switch on the front so you can monitor with 0 latency. Not something I do very often because I like to record with Amp Sims, so we're going to see how this fares. Now, because this is a budget interface for the newbies, I thought it would be fun to do this with a laptop. I don't ever use this laptop for recording, so it's not really set up for that. I have Reaper installed. Not really sure how well it's going to work, but hopefully well enough. And we're going to test out this interface. I'm also going to simultaneously record into my Focusrite so we can see if there's any discernible difference in quality between a much more expensive interface and a budget interface. Now, full disclosure, I was sent this product for free from FiFine, but they have no control over what I say or how I test it or any of my opinions, which are my own opinions. So is it a good buy for someone getting into recording? Is it going to do the job? And are there any downsides to it? Is it a good one for the price? As I mentioned, it is all plastic, which isn't entirely uncommon. The Behringer UM2 is also an all plastic build, and this is pretty similar to that, but it does come in a little bit cheaper. And personally, I think it looks nicer than the Behringer unit. It's a pretty snazzy, sleek-looking box. It's very lightweight, so it doesn't feel expensive, but it looks nice, and it does have LED rings on the sides, which I will show off. So I've got it plugged into my computer, and it does automatically install a driver, but it does not have a proprietary ASIO driver. So I have to use the ASIO for all driver, which I haven't used in a very long time. So that's a throwback. It's great on the team that develops it that they put out a universal ASIO audio driver, which is really important for latency, and you can't connect it to Reaper otherwise. So I don't know. We'll see how well it works. I would have preferred a proprietary driver, but if it works, it works. And I understand not developing a driver on a budget model if it works well with existing software. There are a few other potential areas of concern that I want to test out. Being that it's all plastic, I want to see if I can put it into a situation with some electrical interference with my phone or something and see how easily it picks that up. It is also only 16-bit, which, again, for most situations, probably doesn't matter at all. The difference between 16 and 24 and 32 bits is basically one of headroom and noise floor. So a 16-bit audio interface is potentially more noisy in some situations than 24 bits. 24 bits is better. It's pretty standard now, but both of them are really more than capable so long as the preamp is decent and you're not recording like ultra dynamic sources, which an electric guitar or even a vocal microphone isn't really going to push that level of dynamic detail to the point where I think 16-bit versus 24 really matters. So I am now recording and monitoring through the SC1, and you can see it has a cool little green gain ring that tells you when you're making noise. That's nice. It doesn't change color until you clip, and if I clip the mic, you can see it does flash red. So that's nice. It'll tell you when you're clipping, and the preamps sound fine to me. I'll turn them up all the way, and I'll boost this in post, but you can hear the preamp noise here. Of course, mostly what you hear is the vents and the heater. So the preamps sound good to me. They certainly don't seem like particularly noisy preamps. I don't have a professional way to measure them like Julian Krause. You should go watch his channel if you want really good interface reviews. I don't think he's done this one. So I'm just going to say it doesn't seem like a problem as far as preamp noise goes, at least not for less critical things. Really good preamps are typically quite expensive. I'm sure these aren't as good as super high-end, but you expect that, right? They're not bad. We do have phantom power, lights up green. We also have this mic and instrument impedance switch. That's important. I'm just going to listen to some music real quick and see if the headphones sound loud and if there's anything bad about it. I doubt there would be. Just a quick test of the headphone amp. It does sound loud. It gets louder than I need with the M50s at least, and it sounds clean. I don't hear any distortion even at max volume, which is too loud to listen to for more than a second, but I don't hear anything. There's no noise in the pot, so that's all good. Now, the ASIO for all driver switching back and forth between YouTube and Reaper here does have some little popping going on. That's the kind of driver stuff that you will get a slightly better experience with a nicer, higher-end audio interface. One reason that I do like to recommend Focusrite if you have the budget is because they've been around so long, they've got solid drivers. I don't have any issues with mine currently. I hope that doesn't change. So the next thing to do then is to record some guitar, and I will simultaneously record the same signal through my interface, and so I can compare and see if there is any real difference between the Focusrite 18i20 3rd gen I have back there and the Amplitank SC1 by FiFine. Check 1, 2, all right, yeah, ooh. We're back on air, baby, and I've got this thing, it's purring like a kitten. I did, let me turn off this amp. So I did go in and play around with the ASIO settings a lot in ASIO for all, and I've got it to a point where I'm happy with it. The lowest I could set the buffer size and not have any sort of glitches and dropouts is 192. Now, the latency compensation slider doesn't seem to matter for my purposes of recording guitar and stuff. I think it has something to do with chaining synthesizers together or something, but it doesn't affect the latency that you get like monitoring a plugin or a software synthesizer if you're doing some MIDI stuff. So just the buffer size, and 192 is the lowest I could get to without stuttering at all, and it so far has seemed flawless, and that's 10 milliseconds, okay? That's not perfect. I usually run my Focusrite at like 7 milliseconds round trip. I'm not sure if this is the round trip latency. That's what it displays on Reaper, but sometimes the round trip latency is higher than that number. The Focusrite does give me round trip latency numbers, which are higher than what Reaper says in the top right corner. But regardless, if it is 10 milliseconds, that's not bad. That's about the threshold where any higher than that you might perceive latency. Lower than 10 milliseconds, you're golden, you're fine. You shouldn't feel any latency. At 10 milliseconds, I don't feel any. Even if I do technical stuff, it feels fine. I was doing a little shredding, and that it's no problem for me at 10 milliseconds. I can record with this now. Because I fixed the dropout issue with the buffer size, I could record something with this. Oh yeah, one more thing. Since I didn't mention it before, this does have 1/4 inch outputs, not RCA, which is nice. I think the cheap $50 Behringer has RCA outputs, which is pretty tacky. I don't love that. I don't have any speakers that use RCA cables. That's like old hi-fi speakers. It's kind of odd. So this is proper 1/4 inch outputs, 1/4 inch headphone output, and then the combo jack, XLR, and the instrument. So let's do final pros and cons, and do I recommend this interface? So first of all, I like how it looks. I think the case design is slick, like the LED rings that tell you your signal's good or if you're clipping. Looks nice. Looks like a pretty slick little unit. I think certainly, again, since it's in the same price range, I think it looks nicer than the Behringer. I don't own the UM2, so I can't compare it directly. I know that suffers from the interference issue, and so does this. It's just a matter of being a plastic housing without like fully properly shielded. Basically, we all have a phone, and it's always connected to the internet, and it's always pinging satellites and stuff. So keep it away from your interface when you're recording. The preamps, I think for the price, the preamps, the headphone amp, I've got no issues with them. You can't expect that they're best in class, but modern technology is quite good. This is a dynamic mic. I'm talking right into it, but it's got plenty of healthy signal. I could push it further. This isn't going to be quite as quiet as something like an SM7B, but realistically, are you recording a $400 microphone with a $50 interface? I don't know. You tell me. This is, their own dynamic mic that I think is pretty good. That's also very cheap. This entire setup here, if you want to start a podcast, the mic I think is $38 on Amazon right now, and this is $55. So you're looking at under $100. You got room for, a cheap stand and a cable, and maybe some budget headphones, and for $150 you could have a decent little recording setup. I mean, a lot better than trying to use your phone or something. So that's not bad. If you want to start a podcast or film stuff for YouTube, yeah, it's a totally workable setup. It works fine with Amp Sims. It's not ideal. I would say a really serious guitar player is going to be recording a lot. You might want to spring for something that's got a little better drivers for latency. This, I would say, it performs up to the task, but it's borderline, and it might be a little frustrating if you're recording a lot with it. The latency might be annoying. Probably going to be looking to spend double that if you go with probably the Scarlett Solo is the cheapest one I can say that has good drivers for sure, and that's around $100. So not terribly expensive, but double the price of this. So consider it. This is hitting a very low price point, and I think it does a good job at that, though $50 for an audio interface is that's very cheap. You know, you can expect there's going to be some corners cut, but modern technology prices are very low for things like DACs and preamp stages. So to summarize, I like how it looks. I like the price. I like the sound of it. I don't love the fact that it's plastic and so it has potential interference issues, EMI, lack of shielding stuff. And I don't like the fact that it doesn't have its own drivers. That being said, I think it's a fine unit for the price. I think it competes with what else is in that price range. Would I recommend going really low budget on audio interface? Not really. It's the heart of your studio, and even $100 or $200 is not a huge investment in what's a really crucial piece of your hardware. If they came out with their own drivers for these and they were good, then I would have no problem with it. If it had its own drivers that got the latency down a little bit further, fixed up some of the stability at lower latency, I think with their own proprietary software that was good, that worked with this, and it could be developed for a whole line. I mean, this is their first interface. If they want to expand their range, and if they put in good drivers, and for the bigger units, metal housing and good shielding, what would be cool, I think, would be a reasonably priced but really solid 4-channel or 8-channel. If it came in a little lower than some of the big brands like Audient and Focusrite, there could be a spot in the market for that. I used to have the Tascam US 1800, which was not an amazing interface in a lot of ways, but it did the job, and I used it for about a decade and only kind of hated it some of the time. The drivers weren't the best, and eventually the preamps got really scratchy and basically unusable, which was too bad, but it was still usable for recording guitar. That was a $400 8-channel interface, and I think that they've since replaced it, and they have some other stuff in that market. Hey, if someone could come out with like a $200 or $300 8-channel interface that had a decent driver, that had a decent build, doesn't have to be flagship specs, but that would be pretty cool. It's always nice to see things that would be good for like a portable rig. When you combine it with this K669D dynamic mic for less than $40, you have a very cheap little recording setup that I think will serve you pretty well. And you can judge for yourself the quality of the sound. I think it sounds pretty decent. So I hope you've enjoyed this little look at the Amplitank SC1. And I'll post a link in the description if you want to check it out on Amazon. And as always, smash like, subscribe, and go watch some of my other videos.